Is that not the coolest video you have ever seen? I have got to send my drone Snoopy out to get some nighttime greenhouse shots. Hey there, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and welcome everyone to today's special ACT Summit virtual interactive session, also known as a webinar, Greenhouse Light Abatement Bylaws. Now what? And that is the question. I am Chris Beytes, editor of GrowerTalks, Green Profit, and the e-newsletter Acres Online. And I will be your host for the next hour or so as we walk through the particulars of this challenging new set of rules that have been put into place by the communities of Leamington and Kingsville, Ontario, Canada. Specifically, at least in the case of Leamington, I believe it's called Bylaw 79-20. And what is that all about? Well, you probably know or you wouldn't be here. The bottom line is if you have a greenhouse in either of those municipalities and you use supplemental lighting to grow your crop at night, supplemental lights at night, as of April 1st, you will either need to turn those lights off, which kind of defeats the purpose of having lights, or else you will need to use blackout curtains to prevent 100% of that light or thereabouts from escaping and causing light pollution. It's not a new issue for greenhouse growers. Dutch growers have had similar laws for, I think at least a decade. We'll hear more about that later on from one of our speakers today. But even small isolated growers have faced this challenge, such as Leaf Farms in Loudon, New Hampshire, who we wrote about a couple of years ago, facing his local community with light pollution. But it's a big challenge to grow under a light pollution curtain. And that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about today. However, I am not the expert on the topic. As you know, I'm not the expert on any topic except finding experts on topics. And that's what we've got today. We've got three of them, as a matter of fact, and let me introduce them right now. First up is Ton Habraken, a greenhouse climate expert for Ludvig Svensson. Welcome, Ton.
Good afternoon. Good evening.
And it's good to have you here with us today. Where are you broadcasting from today, Ton?
Out of the beautiful south of the Netherlands. So out of the city called Vught.
Vught. And how's the weather in Vught? Is it spring yet?
It's cold. No, it's not spring yet. And it's cold and it's dark outside. So it's 7 o'clock at our place.
Oh, I thought maybe you had your curtain closed or something like that. The light abatement curtain to avoid light pollution.
No.
All right. And in a nutshell, what does a greenhouse climate expert do for Ludvig Svensson? What's your daily job like?
Well, I advise growers when they are thinking about a new build or when they are thinking about screen replacement, which screens are available and which screens will suit them the best to achieve their goals. And besides advising what screens to use to get the optimal result, I also afterwards, after the screens have been installed, I also help the growers to really get to this result. So I advise them how to use the climate screens.
Well, I sure could have used you back in my greenhouse days, but all right. Thanks, Ton. We're going to talk to you a bit more in a minute. Next up, Paul Jensen. It's like Jensen without the N, he said. Paul, how are you? Welcome, my friend.
Hi, Chris. Welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. You are technical trainer and horticultural consultant for Priva. What does that job entail?
It basically means that any issue that you're dealing with, whether it is climate related, energy, irrigation related, we can always help you sorting things out.
All right. It's rare for me to go into a greenhouse nowadays of any size and not see some of those big, white, beautiful Priva boxes hanging on the wall. And I know they've got some serious environmental controls when I see that.
Yeah. Sure. Absolutely.
All right. Speaking of which, a grower who knows firsthand what it's like to produce a crop under light pollution regulations, Mr. Lars van Baar, who is head grower for Dutch tomato producer Combivliet. Welcome, Lars.
Good evening. Good evening.
Right. I'm really good at goedemiddag, which is good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good evening is
Goedenavond.
Goedenavond. Sorry about that. My Dutch ends at goedemiddag and let up drempel, which means watch out for the speed bumps. Also, no bazooka parking. Anyway, I'm sorry to digress there. Lars, you grow, tell me how many hectares of tomatoes you grow under lights in the Netherlands?
We have more than 100 hectares under light in Holland.
So you are an expert at growing under lights and dealing with light pollution. I
Yeah,
believe we're gonna talk more to you about that later on in the session. We're looking forward to hearing your firsthand experience. But first, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. First, a bit about the host and producer of this ACT Summit. I'll admit ACT was new to me, but ACT is Advancing Cultivation Technology. It's a group of 5 professional companies serving the controlled environment agriculture industry who have joined forces to create a platform to provide education and technical know-how to the high-tech growing and cultivating industry. You can sense from the word cultivate that they had kind of their footing in cannabis 4 years ago when they got started, because the cannabis industry really needed help, but they quickly found that all greenhouse growers, all high-tech growers need this kind of technological information. So they've expanded their reach out to include everyone, which is a big part of why we're here today. The other thing I'd also like to say is if you have questions during the session, can't imagine why you would, but if you do, there's a Q&A section down at the bottom. You can click open, type that in. We're not going to field any questions during the session. We're going to save it for the end, but at which point we'll get through as many as we possibly can. Any others, we'll be sure to provide some contact information for where you can ask those technical questions. And one of the questions that I guarantee will come through, I'm surprised it hasn't already over in the Q&A area, is will this webinar be recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. I can see the record button blinking up there, the record light, which is a good thing. You will get an email after the fact at some point letting you know where you can access that on-demand recording. So gentlemen, I believe that's all I have to say. Let me turn it over to you, Ton, to take it away, share your screen, and get this session rolling.
Thank you. Well, I think this picture says all what the subject is about. Yeah, we see a greenhouse with a lot of lights, and we all know, coming from the greenhouse industry, that it makes a huge difference also if there's a clear night or there is a cloudy night. Especially in a cloudy night, we see a lot of reflection of the lights coming back. Yeah, that really lights up the sky a lot. Let me get this one. So, although it also gives some nice pictures like this really brings up some new, yeah, how you say it, for the Dutch painters, some new inspiration. I like this picture a lot, but I can also imagine that not everyone really enjoys this view every day and all day. So yeah, what can we do about it to make sure that that we keep the light inside the greenhouse, and also that it is being used in an optimal way for the growing process? First, as a sort of introduction, what the bylaws by itself, what do they say, and what do we have to comply to in the upcoming months? Well, there are 2 different differences, as I understood. There's a difference between Leamington and Kingsville, where Kingsville says, okay, during the whole night till 1 hour after sunrise, we have to keep the screens fully closed. And if you have lights and you want to light them again in the end of the day, also 1 hour before sunset, we have to close the screens fully and keep them closed the whole night. While in Leamington, there's one exception, that in the period from midnight till 1 hour after sunrise, there's the exception that between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock, you are allowed to create a gap of 10%. So from 2 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock at night, you are allowed to gap 10%. How is this different from the regulation in the Netherlands? In the Netherlands, the regulation is as follows. From midnight till sunrise, growers with less than roughly 195 micromoles of light, they are allowed to gap 24% in the screen. So they can can gap quite a bit more. Only when you have more than this 195 micromole, then you also have to keep the screens closed for 98%. So from midnight till sunrise, and also from sunset till midnight, also 98% is for all growers in the Netherlands, the rule. There are also some local exceptions, and if I'm correct, the area where Lachs is also growing during the nighttime, they are allowed to gap 4%. So this is a region which is stricter than the rest of the Netherlands. They are only allowed to gap 4%. What type of screens can we use to keep the light in? Well, if we look at our product families, the Svensson product families, then we mainly look at the Obscura screens. And in this product family, we've got screens for light abatement control. These are single layer screens. So I will show you an example in the next slide. But also in Obscura, we've got the light deprivation screens. So these are most of the time double layer screens, and they are used for day length control. For example, cannabis, but also chrysanthemum or kalanchoe, they only go into flower when they have a day which is shorter than 12 hours. And then you need total darkness inside the greenhouse. So those are the light deprivation screens. Within this presentation, I will focus mostly on the light abatement screen, which in our product family is the Obscura 9950 FRW. I will explain you a little bit about the properties of the screen. So this is the horizontal screen for in the ceiling of the greenhouse. It takes away 99.5% of the light. So the light transmittance of the screen is very low. And the energy saving of the screen is 50%. The FR stands for that it is flame retardant, and white, the W stands for white, that you have a white bottom side, but also a white top. The white bottom side is specially meant to reflect the light which comes from the crop back to the crop again. So it's a reflective, highly reflective white underside to make sure that all the light is being reflected back to the crop where it belongs. Looking at the gables, the vertical screens, we've got the Obscura 170R FRW. So 100 again for the light transmission. It doesn't transmit any light. And then there's 70% energy saving. The R stands for that it is a rolling screen. Again, FR for flame retardancy, and white because at both sides he is white. So we can use these screens to block the light as and to comply with the bylaws. These screens, they don't only consist out of plastic strips, but there's also yarn in between and over the strips. And these yarns, they mostly take care of the humidity transport. Because it's not one single yarn, but a bundle of very small yarns, it can take up humidity from the growing area, transport it to the top of the screen, and there release it to dehumidify through the screen. So looking at the screens, they are specially designed to have a high humidity transport. Looking at Obscura 9950 FR, we know from measurements that with inside the growing area 20 degrees Celsius and RH of 80%, and then above the screen 10 degrees Celsius and the RH again of 80%, that through this screen we can transport 47 grams per square meter per hour. So that's quite a lot of humidity, especially if you know that a tomato crop in rest position, so without artificial lights or without a heating pipe activating the plant. So a tomato plant in rest position produces 20 to 24 grams per square meter per hour. So with these capabilities of humidity transport, the screen is well capable of releasing the humid air through the screen without any problem. There's enough capacity. But of course, things change once we get to the lighting. The driving factor, I wanted to point out, the driving factor of humidity transport through the screen is the absolute humidity difference. So especially between the growing area, the absolute humidity, and the absolute humidity above the screen, that's the driving factor for humidity transport through the screen. So with the factors I just mentioned, so 20 degrees Celsius inside the growing area and RH of 80%, and 10 degrees Celsius and RH of 80%, the absolute humidity difference between the two areas is 6.5 grams per cubic meter. So this absolute humidity difference of 6.5, it gives you possible humidity transport through the screen of 47 grams per square meter per hour. But once we start lighting, once we start activating the crop, once we also start heating up the greenhouse, this humidity transport will be, the humidity production of the crop will be much higher. So once we start lighting the crop, we get into a total different circumstance, that the humidity production is much higher. This is not a problem once the screens are fully open. It is also not a problem when the screens are on quite a gap. In this picture, we see a gap of 24%. But once the screen is fully closed, we might have a problem. And I can show you in the next model. I know, because what happens when the lights switch on, when the lights switch on, we get a lot of heat in the top of the greenhouse. And due to this heat in the greenhouse, we get a vertical temperature difference. So in the top, it's really warm underneath the screen, while at the bottom, if the pipes are not being activated, it's rather cool. So within the vertical within the greenhouse, we see a big temperature difference, and therefore also a disbalance within the crop. So what can we do with to prevent this from happening? Well, to get rid of the extra produced humidity, we can start opening the vents above the closed screen till a certain period, where we do have to, when the humidity is getting too high and the heat is getting too much, then we have to take extra actions. And then, of course, in the Netherlands, we are allowed to gap the screen. And to prevent this horizontal temperature difference, we also want to have a pipe in the greenhouse to heat up the bottom as well, so that there will be, again, a balance within the crop, that there is not a lot of temperature difference between the roots and the head of the plant. How much does a lighted crop transpire? Well, there are models for this, and we can calculate it. In this example, we see that some outside conditions, 5 degrees Celsius, inside the greenhouse 20 degrees Celsius, and a RH of 85%. We have opened the windows already a bit, and we've got 220 micromole of Senti lights. When we run the program, then we see that in this case, there is a humidity production of 70 grams per square meter per hour. So once we start activating the crop, we see that there's too much humidity production to make sure that it goes through the climate screen, because as I mentioned before, when we close the screen with almost the same circumstances, we know that the screen can transport 47%, 47 grams per square meter per hour. Well, because we closed the screens, we already opened the vents a little bit more, and we see that the transpiration is still the same. So there's still the same humidity production. We often get the question from growers, well, if we know this, that the humidity production is much higher, why don't you produce a screen which has properties which transport more humidity and which let through more heat? But to produce a screen which has to block all the light and also has to let through a lot of humidity and heat, that's a contradiction that doesn't work together. We have experience on this by producing a screen which is more open, and if you produce a screen which is more open, then it works against you. And I can explain you in the next one. Here we see a screen which has a openness of 5% in itself, and due to this openness, the gap, as you could say, of 5%, it is spread all over the screen, but therefore it insulates a lot less. So instead of 50% energy saving, there's less energy saving. So due to this fact, we need more heating power in the greenhouse, and therefore the humidity, the transpiration even increases. So by having a screen which transmits more humidity, which let through more heat, you get the result which you don't want, because the crop will be transpiring even more, and even more gap is needed in the screen. So yeah, looking at the Leamington situation, what we do in the Netherlands is that we start our lighting at midnight. So at 12 o'clock, we start the first phase and the second phase of the lighting, and we leave it on until roughly 5-6 o'clock in the evening. And there, yeah, we face the problem that here the screen has to be closed, and here also the screen has to be closed. So we were thinking it might be better to shift the lighting period till just before 2 o'clock, that we switch on half of the lights just before 2 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock, well, when we are allowed to have a gap, I don't say that you immediately have to make the gap of 10%, but at least at that time you are allowed to gap, that then you have the full power and the full energy of the lights. This way you bring the lighting a little bit further into the evening, but there at the end, when the lights are off, of course you can gap or open the screen fully. So this could be a possible part of the solution for the Leamington area, and same thing for Kingsville, where the screen has to be closed all night and also in the evening. It might be a good idea to switch the lighting period to some hours later, that you can use the coldness of the night to get a lower 24 average temperature. So far, explanation from my side. As of here, Paul Jensen will take over, and I will be back in a few sheets with a continuation of my story.
Yes, thank you, Ton. Now let's see, I will share my screen with you. You have mentioned already a number of things, already a number of issues that you are going to deal with, and this is basically what you are going to deal with. You have to, at some point, address these bylaws, or you have to obey these bylaws. You have to close the curtains. You are not allowed to emit any light. So you need some kind of control. Unfortunately, it is not a climate control. It will destroy your climate. That's pretty much one certainty. So you just have to make the best of it. Now, in order to control this climate itself, or to use this this bylaw, let me get this pointer here. There you go. The challenge is at first that you are not allowed to emit any light. So for that reason, like you explained, Ton, you have to close the curtain. And that closing that curtain results in a number of other issues or difficulties. You have your vertical temperature difference, the increase of temperature, the increase of humidity, your absolute humidity, as you mentioned. So those are a number of issues that you are dealing with. Well, let's start with the easiest one that we can deal with, and that is making sure you're not emitting any light. You've got your light emission strategy for that, and this is a very straightforward if this then that function. It's not for controlling climate. It just states if the light is on in between certain clock hours, the curtain has to be closed. Now, depending on the region where you are, you either have to the choice to use to maximize your curtain position. This maximum light emission also states it is a minimum curtain capacity, minimum curtain position. So your maximum light emission of 0% equally is the same as 100% as a minimum curtain position. So depending on the location, you can either say between 1 hour before sunset and 1 hour after sunrise, your maximum light emission is 0%. And because of that, the curtain will close. For those customers that actually do have the possibility to open the gap for 10%, please make sure that the control will close the curtain because of this light emission strategy. And if you are allowed to gap, make sure that this gap comes in gradually. If you would decide at 2 o'clock that you are allowed to gap, and maybe your computer has already decided that it actually needs to gap for this 10%, and all of a sudden your full 10% is included as a gap, it'll take only a few seconds or a few minutes and your complete climate is gone. You have a huge issue. So please make sure that if you are going to use this gap, if you are allowed to use this gap, to introduce this gap gradually. And this is just a numbers figure. Any number that I'm using in my presentation is just for explanation purposes only. So in this picture, I'm going to use this indicator for heating. It's just an indicator just for me explaining a number of things. This is your situation that you are in a day-to-day basis. You have a certain amount of energy needed inside your greenhouse, and this energy is made by your heating installation. So this is very traditional. You've got your heating in the bottom of your greenhouse, heating up the crop, heating up the air, and you've got this natural airflow. So you got warm feet and cold heads. And this is what you normally would have to do or normally see. But what happens if you have lights? The energy itself, the amount of energy is still the same. Only the location, your energy source will change. Where you normally will do everything with your pipes, now all of a sudden, part of it is being made by the lights. Now, because you cannot dim those lights, not from energy point of view, they will always make a certain amount of heat. Your temperature of the pipe has to be reduced, otherwise your greenhouse temperature is increasing. So what you already see now, even with the curtains opened, you get like a disbalance in your energy flow. There is no longer a large airflow from the bottom of your greenhouse all the way up, but it is distributed slightly different. If you start using those curtains, the curtains that Tom just mentioned, with an energy saving of 50%, of course you need less energy. And since you cannot control, you cannot dim the light source, the full energy savings is going to be taken into account by your pipes. As a result, your pipe temperatures is going to be even lower. So now you get very cold feet and very warm heads. I can assure you that Lars can talk to you about this, about what happens, what is the disadvantage in your crop. I'm just a technical consultant, so Lars can explain this much better than I can. But I can assure you that this is something you don't want. So you have to do something about it. So you have to make sure that at first this temperature imbalance needs to be solved. How? By simply implementing a higher minimum pipe temperature. So in the event of having your curtains closed and or your light switched off on, you want to use a different setting for your minimum pipe temperature. And this could be done with an alternative strategy or a correction that states, if the curtains are closed and the lights are on, I'm going to use a different set point for my minimum pipe temperature. So it looks something like this. With just the lights on, instead of using your traditional minimum pipe temperature, now you have to force it and you're going to X. You adjust your minimum pipe temperature setting. And if you then also close the curtain, you can also say, in that situation, I yet need another minimum pipe temperature. This minimum pipe temperature is not needed to create your greenhouse temperature, but it's just needed to create the optimum temperature to create a proper flow inside your greenhouse. But because of this, you yet run into a different issue, into another problem, because you have activated your pipes, you have activated your lights, so your crop is going to be very active. Temperature is going very high, and your absolute humidity also is becoming too high. And at some point, in worst case scenario, becomes so high that your plant stops evaporating because it cannot get rid of its humidity anymore. So fortunately, if we zoom into this curtain, there is a possibility to go through the curtain. So the air, the humidity flows through the air. Tom mentioned on a delta T of 10 degrees Celsius, you could still, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but something like 47 grams per square meter, correct? So you need to have some kind of delta T, or is it delta T or a delta absolute humidity? For this presentation, I'll just be using delta X, and delta X is a combination of the delta T and your delta absolute humidity. So as long as you are speaking of a large delta X, then you are losing your temperature and your humidity, and the curtain has got enough capacity to get rid of it, and it'll just run onto your greenhouse roof and it will condensate, and that's how you get rid of your humidity. But what if your delta X is not so big? The temperature over here or your humidity above your curtain is also relatively high in relationship to what is happening below the curtain. Your delta X now becomes slightly less, so it is more difficult to get rid of your humidity. It's more difficult to get rid of your excess temperature. Well, then in that case, of course, you need to open your vents. This is already mentioned by Tom, but how would you do this in practice? Well, first of all, as an additional measurement, it is very common nowadays to have an additional measuring box which measures the conditions above your curtains. It measures the absolute humidity, or it measures the humidity, it measures your temperature, because based on this delta T, you can make an action. For instance, you can influence your minimum vents position based on your absolute humidity or your absolute humidity difference. If you don't have a measuring box like such, it is still possible to do something. For instance, simply just use different minimum vents positions. With the curtain closed, normally you have your original set point. in your strategy. But if your curtain closes, you want to use a bigger minimum vents position. The combination of the curtain closed and your lights are on for 50%, 33%, you name it, you need a bigger minimum vents position. So you can see, I will just start with a small adjustment, and by adding more things over here, 50% grow light, 100% grow light, the minimum vents position just keeps on increasing. Now there is a downside to this adjustments on a minimum vents position, because eventually you don't exactly know whether it is too little or too much what you are doing. It's a set point. You just simply set a minimum vents position and that's it. It doesn't control any further than that. An additional possibility would be, and I think a better possibility would be, to adjust your proportional band, the P band of your vents, because based on the P band, you decide how aggressive your vents will react. And you can state that if you're using the smaller your P band becomes, the more aggressive you start ventilating. So with, for instance, you have 1 degree inside your greenhouse too much, it's 1 degree above desired. You have with a large P band, you have 10% vents position. With a smaller P band, you could have 50% vents position. So the smaller your P band is, the more aggressive your vents will react. And this is also done with an alternative strategy or a correction recipe that you will find in our systems. Unfortunately, you are not always able to open the vents, or you are limited to open the vents. Think of storm limits, it is freezing, it's raining, all those kind of events. You are not able to open the vents, but you still need to have some delta absolute humidity or delta T. We are pretty much done at this moment with this type of control. This is all we can do. But fortunately, and now we go back to Ton, there are supplemental components that you can use. Ton, back to you.
So we've been talking about eliminating the gaps. We don't want gaps, and this also has a positive side, because we know from gapping in the screens that we also can have huge temperature differences within a greenhouse. This is due to the fact that warm air will rise at spots which are warm. The air will cool down against the glass and will drop back into the greenhouse. And within a few minutes, you get a temperature difference of 5 degrees Celsius within your greenhouse. And heating or lights will even accelerate this process from happening. So we want the screens to be closed to have a more homogeneous greenhouse climate anyway. And also by having the screens fully closed, you will make full use of the reflection of the light. And the reflection of the light can take up to 7% extra efficiency of your lights by reflecting the light back to the crop. So you get a higher light level for your crop. But yeah, if we don't use gaps, as Paul explained, what do we do then? If we don't have gaps and there's no possibility, for example, to vent above the screen, well, then we need some extra tools to control the climate in the growing area. And an example of this is, for example, the ventilation jet. This is a fan system which takes fresh air, brings it into the growing area. And by this tool, you can you can have controlled ventilation of the growing area. So with fully closed screens, you can still ventilate the growing area. The system consists out of 2 fans, and I will show you later in the next slide how it works. the way it works here, you see it better. There's a envelope which goes through the trolley, through the screens, and from above the screen, fresh air can be taken by this fan, and it can be brought into the growing area. Because there's a plate here, it will go sideways, and then there's a second fan, which is a horizontal fan. It will take the air from which is within the greenhouse and will mix it with the fresh air, and therefore by bringing in fresher, cooler, and also due to that drier air, you can dehumidify the greenhouse, and you can also bring down the temperature. Yeah, as Svetson, we started the cooperation with the company which provides these fans. The company is called Hinova, and yeah, you will hear more from us in the next weeks of this cooperation and what it can bring to you. Yeah, how does the system work? So first, you draw in fresh air from above the screen. There is the air distribution just below the screen, and as I said, it works sideways. And this fan, it is modular, so it runs faster or slower depending on the conditions. So for example, if there's a smaller absolute humidity difference, the fan will run faster, and if there's a bigger absolute humidity difference, the fan will run slower. Same, of course, counts for the temperature. If there's a bigger temperature difference, then this fan can run slower. The bottom fan, it always continues running because it mixes the fresh air with the already available greenhouse air. And by having this air, this breeze over your crop, pushing the warm air from your lamps also down towards the gutter. In the end, it also helps you in creating a more homogeneous climate. So by taking the heat coming from the lamps and pushing it more to the bottom of the greenhouse. With the system, you can cool the greenhouse, the growing area down. You can bring in fresh air, and this fresh air, because it's colder, it has less humidity in it. And by mixing it with the warm and humid air, you are dehumidifying at the same time. So this really can bring you a lot in controlling the climate under a fully closed climate screen. What it also brings you, the vertical air movement, is that it has a big influence on the microclimate around the leaf. So if we look at the leaf, there is always a microclimate layer, and the humidity of the plant has to go through this microclimate layer before it goes into the greenhouse air. And by having a breeze all over your crop, you diminish this layer. It will be smaller, and therefore it's easier for the leaf to get rid of its humidity. Normally, of course, we do this with the air movement because of the pipe, but yeah, creating air movement with the pipe is rather expensive, and it's easier and cheaper to do it with a vertical fan. With such a system, and especially with tomatoes, I don't say that you should switch off your minimum pipe at all, because we need also radiation heat towards the truss, towards the fruit. So especially a pipe next to the fruit is helpful to make sure that the fruit also ripens off in fast enough, that the speed is taken care of, that you can harvest the tomatoes fast enough. Yeah, so with the system, it's not needed to make gaps or to cut gaps into the screen, because it runs just around it. So you don't really have to make adjustments to the screen. No holes are needed for this system, as it is a very small envelope to take in the fresh air to the greenhouse. And by using such a system, yeah, you can have the screen fully closed. Also here in this greenhouse, the lights are on, as you can see from this small gap. But yeah, using such type of system, by bringing in fresh air into the growing area, you can keep the screens closed, while at another section, yeah, it's still needed to gap. Going back to Paul to that he can explain how these systems can be controlled on the Priva.
Yes, thank you, Tom. There we go. So this is the installation that you were talking about, and these vertical controllers that you'll see here. Now, when the curtain is open, they would still function, not so much as a mixer, but just as horizontal or vertical airflow fans, just as your typical fan that you would have installed in your greenhouse at the moment. So they do get like an additional function as soon as your curtains are closed. And this is, of course, not completely the way they are installed, but I guess you can see how it is. So you get your cold and dry air above your curtains, and they are blown into your greenhouse, mixing it with the greenhouse air. You've got two fans, a small fan. This is, I would like to call it my my mixing fan, and this is more like a propulsion. This is more for air circulation. Now, because what Tom already mentioned, ideally you would be controlling based on absolute humidity difference, but for that you do need to have a measuring box above your curtains. But if you do so, it comes with a number of, it has an added value. So how does it control? Well, to be honest, you've got a scoop. Recently, we are about to release a software version that allows you to control these types of mixing fan systems like the Hinova system. What you have in this situation, because I do have a measuring box over there, I can determine the absolute humidity difference, but also your temperature difference. And based on that, we will briefly do this. We can actually determine the speed of your mixing fan. Now, it's not being done with a linear thing or something. No, this mixing fan is increasing and decreasing with a step controller. It's pretty much the same step controller we've got in our gap control as well. So what happens here, based on the absolute humidity difference or your temperature difference, we determine the steps, the step size, whether it is a small step or a large step or anything in between. If there is a large delta temperature or delta humidity, you only have to make small adjustments on this fan speed, because with a small adjustments you can already do quite a lot. But you can also imagine that if the difference between the air above your curtain and below the curtain with small steps, you're not getting to where you want to. So you have to make larger steps. So if you have a small difference, a small delta absolute or small delta T, you need to make larger steps. And what happens with the software, because your original measuring box, I forgot to draw it in my presentation here, but it's somewhere close to the crop. The fan increases in speed, and it just waits a moment, like let's say anything between 4 and 10 minutes, something like that. It takes a step, it waits until it releases, it reaches, the air reaches your measuring box to see what the differences are. If nothing has happened or your delta becomes bigger, we make a step. And this is how the step control works. So the system takes a step, it analyzes for a certain time, and it makes another step. Unless, of course, your set point is spot on, then we don't need to increase or decrease the fan speed. Now, if you don't have this measuring box above your curtain, we'd still be able to control the fan speed, but it becomes a fixed step. So if the difference is big, we take steps that are probably too big. If the difference is too small, then probably we take steps that are too small, but this is what you get. So ideally, you would have an additional measuring box above your curtain. If the delta T, or the delta between your greenhouse temperature, greenhouse absolute humidity, and the situation above your curtain is too little, this is sort of the next step. It'll also control your vents to open, also with the same step control. So we take a small step when the difference between the area above your curtain and the outside situation, if there is a big difference, we take small steps. If this delta becomes smaller, then we take larger steps. And that's how things are situated. I also have a graph that actually shows you what is happening. This is a screenshot from a customer who is using the system that Tom was just introducing. So what you see here, you see a red line running over here, which all of a sudden increases. And this is your greenhouse absolute humidity, which is also suddenly increasing. Why? Because the light is switched on. So the light switches on, temperature increases, absolute humidity increases, but at the same time, this is the absolute humidity above the curtain, and it pretty much stays the same. It slowly increases a little bit. It goes from 8 to 9 grams per meter cube, but that's about it. What you also notice that this block here actually says that the mixing system is switched on, and you see these squares over here. This controls your fan speed. So based on the difference of absolute humidity below the curtain and above the curtain, based on that difference, it determines whether it needs to increase or decrease the speed of your mixing fan. But you also see that when this installation becomes active, we cannot get rid of this excess amount of temperature and humidity. It's there. It's you cannot beat nature. But what you do see that it stabilizes humidity, stabilizes temperature, stabilizes, and that's what you are aiming for. So this is what you will see as soon as you will introduce installations like the Hinova ventilation jet. You'll see that, of course, the temperature is a little higher than maybe desired, and also humidity is higher than desired, but there's no getting around it. You have to deal with this kind of things. So that'll be my contribution, and I think we go back to you, Chris.
Excellent. Great information, Toon and Paul. We want to go to Lars now. Lars, you've heard everything that the guys had to say about the growing conditions in a greenhouse with the light abatement curtain shut. Let me ask you first, how long have you in the Netherlands been having to deal with the light pollution regulations? When did those go into effect?
When we built our first greenhouse in Middenmeer, that was in a place of Holland without any greenhouse. So they start with huge greenhouses over there. So they make new rules for the light pollution. So that time, that's now 10 years ago.
Yeah. And what are the rules that you face in Middenmeer?
4%
percentage closed, gapping, things like that.
From 12 o'clock in the night till sunrise, it's 4%. And when we want to use assimilation lights from 6 till 12 o'clock in the evening, we can cap only 1%, but most of the time we don't use them.
Yeah. Was that a challenge for you to learn how to grow or change your growing under those kind of conditions?
No, it's not easy. It's not easy, but with 4%, we can deal with it. We can deal with it. It's not a big problem.
So that's enough.
Sometimes you have some nights in autumn, in October, November, when you have warm nights like 15 degrees outside temperature. Yeah, then you have to accept more over temperature in the night, during the night, and when it rains or when there is almost no wind. We are lucky in Holland. The wind is always blowing, especially in the north where we are situated. So that's not a big problem. But when there is no wind, it's also no. Then there's no outside. The weather outside don't take the humidity and the temperature from.
Nothing to help with the natural ventilation.
Yeah.
I assume you're growing in a Venlo style greenhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. Other than that, what has been the biggest challenge with growing under a curtain at nighttime?
To deal with the temperature, you need also a heating pipe. I don't work with the system what Ton introduced, the ventilation system. So we only work with a gap in the screen. But it's very important that you use also a heating pipe. We cannot grow without a heating pipe. Otherwise, you had a warm head of the plant and cold tomatoes. So it takes a lot of time when you can harvest those tomatoes. So that makes the head really generative. So because the tomatoes don't came off the plant, and you reproduce a lot of new tomatoes in the head, so the plant load became too high, so that makes it generative. So you need the heating pipe, but that's sometimes a fight. When you already fight with the temperature during the night, then you also used to have the heating pipe. So that's sometimes difficult. But the last years we learned to use the windows. We open the windows more and more. We are not afraid to use them per 100% lee side, 100% wind side during the night. So that's makes it easier.
All right, let's dive into some of the questions we've gotten from the audience. Ton and Paul, if you want to unmute yourself, and you guys can help me figure out who's best to answer these. We had a few that came in actually prior to the session, and we're going to tackle those. This one from a fellow we may all know, John from Connecticut, wants to know that he says that most supplemental lighting in the greenhouse is directed down towards the plants. Are there measurements about the distance that the light escapes? So you're aiming the light down, and yet you've got light escaping out of the top. How do we measure that and account for that?
Yeah, well, we know that the light, especially from HPS lamps, is also being reflected by the crop and by the ground cover and all those kind of things. So there's also light going up. Mm-hmm. And we know we did some measurements when we had the screen open or the screen fully closed, that we saw that there was an increase in the light level of up to 7%. So when we closed the screen, more light was being reflected back to the crop. And then we saw with the light measurement that the light level went up with 7%. So that's about what you can gain, not losing light to the environment.
Yeah, Bruno said that I understand that greenhouse light abatement laws bring some concerns and challenges from a temperature and relative humidity point of view. But he says that we know that light abatement curtains reduce the light loss from the HPS or LED light. So you're actually gaining light. How can you use that as part of your strategy?
As I said, that this is roughly 7%, which you gain. And due to more light, you could have a little bit higher, you can handle a little bit higher temperature. There's a light temperature ratio. And if you receive more light, your temperature could be a little bit higher.
Yeah. Can you turn off 7% of your lights and use that as somehow in the strategy, or does that make any difference?
That's not what a grower would normally do. They would want to make full use of the available light.
Right. Going to go for more, right, Lars? All right.
Yeah.
Let's see. I was curious about LEDs versus HPS. And Sam kind of asked a similar question. Would LEDs have any kind of an advantage?
I think LED is for this problem better because you do not produce that much as temperature above in the greenhouse. But I think that the orange color, maybe they can accept a little bit, but the pink color outside, that's also for Holland, is that still new. We are working a few years, but now more and more LED is installed. So I am also waiting on new rules, what we expect here in Holland. I'm afraid of that.
Yeah, have the purple LEDs, the pink, has that brought more negative, unwanted attention on the greenhouse light pollution issue in general, do you think, Lars? Or in Canada, did that have any role in what we're seeing now?
Yeah, I think it's coming. It's still quiet, but yeah, the orange color looks a little bit like the sun, the moon, the stars, but the pink, yeah,
yeah, we're used to a city like Chicago or Amsterdam glowing orange.
Amsterdam, we also have some pink streets, but they don't grow tomatoes over there.
How about CO2 beneath the curtain and controlling that? What's the situation there?
I saw the question, but I do not understand the question exactly.
Well, Samuel is asking, does say having to use a curtain or gapping lead to a greater challenge maintaining consistent CO2 levels?
No, I think because there's less air exchange, less air, going through the windows directly outside, that you could maintain a higher CO2 level under a closed curtain. That would be my my estimate. And looking at the bottom fan of the system I introduced, this also mixes the CO2 around the plant more and more. So I don't see a big challenge for that.
All right.
No, I also don't see that.
Not a problem then. All right. How about now the Netherlands can be a fairly harsh climate, but maybe nothing like parts of Canada. What's the strategy when you're dealing with some real temperature extremes? And maybe you just can't vent the greenhouse, on some cold winter days. Yeah,
that's hard. That was we talking about the beginning of the end of last week with Tom also. When it's really cold, you cannot open your fans. That makes it hard. We had 3 weeks ago for the Netherlands already a cold winter from minus 10 degrees. Then it's hard to. You cannot open your fans, so you have to deal with the temperature there. And it's also dangerous when you have a lot of snow, because then you need the temperature from under your screen to bring up to remove your snow from the windows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I can add to this, heat is most likely more a problem in those cases than the humidity, because you will also have a lot of condensation on the roof, even ice on the roof due to the coldness outside. So I guess the heat is more a problem in those circumstances than the humidity, because the humidity will be discharged by the condensation and by the freezing on the roof.
Okay. A couple more questions. Lars, any advice to the Canadian growers now facing this rule that they haven't had to grow under before?
negotiate with the government. And especially, I don't know exactly the one of the parts have not to deal with anything, but the other have. There was a possibility to use a cap of 10% in the night, so that's more than enough in my opinion. So maybe you can bring it back to 4% for the whole night. Then it's much better. But especially when you cannot use a gap in the screen, yeah, maybe then look to what Ton is telling you with the ventilation jets. That can be a really good possibility.
Yeah, and maybe it's a little late now for Kingsville or Leamington, or maybe they have to go back to the back to the council to negotiate. But certainly, any other communities, have we heard that there may any rumblings out in BC or in Quebec of similar regulations coming down the pike where the industry can get ahead of it? Ton or Paul?
Yeah, what I heard from my North American colleagues is that also other regions are looking at the same example as what the growers are doing, or what the local government is doing in the Leamington and Kingsville area. So yeah, I can imagine that they will look at the same things and look at the example given.
Yeah, I think especially it's the same down here in the States, especially in areas where you're seeing a lot of, say, cannabis production, which brings a lot of attention, puts the spotlight on the greenhouse industry, maybe negatively. So two last questions. I think I fibbed a second ago. Are there any programs for assisting with funding blackout curtains that you're aware of here in Canada?
I'm not aware of the local of the Canadian possibilities. I haven't been, unfortunately, for a long time, not in North America due to the corona. I know that in the Netherlands there's no possibility for that those light abatement screens are not applicable for subsidies.
Yeah, and we do have a couple of the Canadians. Are Stella and Henry are those little white dots that you see. They're just monitoring things from behind the scenes. That if they want to weigh in with any thoughts there. Also, the same attendee assumes or wonders, is a woven aluminum curtain, your typical heat retention curtain, sufficient? I would assume no. Am I correct on that one, Tom?
I'm not sure what woven aluminum screen they're talking about, but most of the times they do not block the light for 99.5%. So they would not be enough to contribute to help the grower to follow the bylaw.
Yeah,
it's
you either
not
have
enough
to turn on your lights or install an Obscura type curtain.
Yes, because you need to have this 99.5% blockage of the light.
Right. Lastly, do you, other than say the Innova ventilation jet, which is pretty fascinating, do you know of any other technologies being looked at to help growers with this situation? Because it seems like, we have lights and then we just hang a curtain, sort of kind of an old-fashioned, very primitive way to deal with this. Are there any new technologies that are going to help growers out?
There are different fan systems. There are also systems which have air treatment units at the gable in the greenhouse, and they bring in air with tubes into the under the gutter. And yeah, also mentioned the LED lights most likely will have a positive effect on the growing environment, because they do not produce nothing, but they do produce less heat. And they bring less heat into the greenhouse. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any last words, gentlemen, for the growers who are listening in?
Yeah. Well, it has been mentioned by Paul several times. If you don't have a measurement box yet above your climate screen, that's the first and the easiest return on investment. Install one with a temperature and the RH sensor, and even better also if you would have a RH sensor outside, so that you can have a full control of and a good visualization where the differences in absolute humidity, where the differences in temperature are, and that you can take the right steps.
Okay. And Paul?
Yeah, I guess I have to agree on that one, Tom. Definitely a big asset to your installation. You are going to deal with a number of issues, and with today's technology, you are still not able to get rid of it, but you have to manage it differently. You have to deal with it in a slightly different way than what you are used to at the moment.
Sure. All right. Now, if our audience has any further questions from a technical point of view, how can they reach Tone or Paul? How can they reach you guys? Do we happen to have a slide we could pop up with any contact information?
Yeah, Chris?
Yep.
Hey, Chris, it's Henry. Yeah, if they just want to continue to put their questions in the Q&A right now, I know that we will be taking all of those into account and get back to everybody with the answers as quickly as possible. I think if they want to send any questions to our either of the speakers or also Lars, Paul, or Ton, or even yourself, Chris, they can send it to my email address. And what I'll do is, I didn't put that on the screen, but if they want to send that to me, and then I can distribute that. And that, let me just put that in the in a quick screen here, and then everybody can just write that down. But it's Henry, so Henry, and then my last name dot Van Gameren. It's VANGAMEREN @priva.com. So I'm going to somehow just put that on the screen here for a second, and then
All right.
we'll make sure that everybody has a chance to ask their questions accordingly.
All
but they
right.
can also
if they've started rolling in here, we have to stop.
Yeah.
They've started rolling in. One of them I can answer. Gordy wants to know, is this going to be posted to view again? It is. They
absolutely.
just won't tell me where, Gordy. But
Yeah.
what I heard was you'll be getting, if you were on this webinar, you'll be getting an email telling you where it will be posted. And I can tell you, if you read Acres Online, my newsletter, and if you don't, shame on you, but if you do, I'm going to be kind of posting the highlights from this session, including the location where you can watch and listen again, because there was a lot of technical information to digest in one session. All I know is it made me glad I was a Florida grower with no lights, because this is getting complicated.
We're going to be
I did have a black cloth system for blooming my photoperiodic plants like mums and poinsettias. So that'll do the trick, right?
You can help. It can
Boy,
help.
was it hot underneath there in Florida. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to thank Lars, especially our grower representative, the real world guy, for joining us this afternoon, along with Tone and Paul. And I want to thank you guys for having me part of this. It's been a pleasure to be involved. So on behalf of Priva, Svensson, the ACT Summit folks, for bringing together experts, I'm Chris Beytes saying so long, everybody.